So I'm Sheila, and I'm here to share with you a few rules of how we can actually help save our planet. But before I do that, I want to tell you a little bit about my why. My why emigrated to America, and he had no English language skills. He had no credentials that were really recognized there. So instead of investing in his own professional career, he invested in us by sharing wisdom and advice. So I'll share some advice with you. The advice that I got from him was drink a glass of milk, and I think this is the universal sign for fatty foods. Eat fatty foods before you go to a meeting where there will be alcohol served, because then you don't make silly business decisions. That was very practically useful. And the second piece of advice was given to me when I was sitting with him, and he looked at my report card, and he looked at my English language class. I think it said A- instead of A+. And he said, Sheila, in order for you to succeed in this country, you must master the English language so that you can communicate well, so you can articulate, have positive social change through sharing ideas. So here I am. I'm about to share an idea with you. That idea is that everyone should and could be a good neighbor to their planet. Mentioned earlier, I'm the executive director for the Sports Environment Alliance, and it's a not-for-profit to get the sport industry to do more for the world, minimize their impact in terms of resource use. And even within our circles, we have a lot of, I think we would call them, planet perpetrator poster children like motorsport, and even they can be, the cleanest, the greenest, as much as any other hippie around. So I'll tell you more about that, and I hope that you would help us move with the sport industry forward in the environmental sustainability movement. But meanwhile, 3 weekends ago, there was Open House Melbourne, and I was lucky enough to go to the Russell Street substation. How many of you have been to the Russell Street substation? A few. It's a very interesting place, I'll tell you. A couple interesting factoids. Having the Russell Street substation gave us, Melbourne, energy 20 years before Sydney. Well, that's pretty good. And yeah, I know. The other thing was that it made us number 3 in the world to have had power, public power, so that we could actually provide energy for street lighting. So those are some really interesting things. Now, the other thing I learned while I was there was this term called an induction circuit. Now, I didn't know what this term was before, but I was accompanied by an energy expert who shared this with me. Basically, it's 2 coils. So there's one coil that's generating energy, and a separate coil that's taking the energy and then feeding a system. And why I shared this particular term with you is because coincidentally, this is so bizarre, the next day I was reading an article on this thing called energetic vampirism. Now, energetic vampirism is this thing where people who engage in it are called energy vampires, and they steal life energy from other people through manipulation. Okay, now, you've probably seen these people before. They're in a conversation, they take over, they ask you for money, and when you're looking for them, you can't find them. So these types of people, energy vampires, are not good for what we want to do, and that is to save our planet, to get our planet to a better place. We're well aware of a number of factoids, stats and so on that say things like the interaction of us and the planet, we're consuming 50% more resources than the planet is generating at any given time. We've heard all of that. And we really want to get to a stage where we're surviving, where we're doing less bad so that we can ultimately do more good, and that is through thriving. And really, this idea of thriving, you've probably heard of it before. So you've heard these terms like net positive, restorative practices, carbon positive, and I have a simple solution for us to get there. And that is, don't be an energy vampire, and instead be neighborly. And this is based on lots of research, a lot of ideas that have been shared before. It's probably not new to you. And one of the quotes that I heard was really great by this guy named Tony Arnell. Tony Arnell was a director for the World Green Building Council, and he said, if you want to go far, you go together. And by saying, we need to do this together, that means, doing it with other people, being good to each other, being essentially, like I said, a good neighbor. Now, let's take a second to think about, what does a good neighbor look like? For me, I think of the really simple, very classic idea of, neighbors sharing sugar and milk. So I like to drink my tea with sugar, and my neighbor, her name is Shez likes to drink her coffee with milk. So say I look into my cupboard and I say, gosh, I don't have any sugar, but I have milk, and she has milk, she has sugar but doesn't have milk. So in those instances, we lean on each other so that we could be equally satisfied, but in different ways. It's a mutual thing, it's a complementary thing, it's just being neighborly in a different way. So the idea here is that we move ideas to action where both we, as citizens of the planet, and the planet can both be equally satisfied, but in different ways. Now, based in my research in corporate social responsibility and environmental sustainability, I've boiled it down to 3 very simple rules for us to engage as good neighbors to the planet. So the first rule is give only what you can and take only what you need and no more. And I think the critical thing about this is that, thinking about the overextension, whether that be yourself or of taking, it's unsustainable. The second rule is the more you use, the more you give. A lot of research talks about, the bigger you are, the more space you take, the more resources you use. And maybe your profile is very large, in which case you have more reach, you have more influence, you have more impact, in which case then your expectations of you to give back more is greater. So this is the basis for this rule. And then the last rule is something I've said already, but it's really the idea of this is an evolution. You take steps. You walk before you run. You survive before you thrive. So doing less bad so that we can do more good. Now, these 3 rules are very, very simple. It's something to consider as citizens of the planet. And I want to show you a few examples of these rules in action. So the first one is in Perth. There's a Perth wave energy project, and essentially they have these big buoys in the ocean, and they're tethered to the ocean floor. And what happens is, with the ocean's movement, it captures the energy, channels that use that to energize a pump, and that pump-like action then facilitates a desalination plant. So you can see all of the different elements of leaning on each other, giving what you can, taking what you need. The second example is a collaboration between solar panels and wildflowers. Now, if you think about where solar panels are installed, they're on rooftops and so on, and the idea that this has been circulated around is that they put wildflower fields underneath it. So then the solar panels where they're installed are actually creating almost recreating an ambiance, a natural ambiance where there's shade. And that shade provides a refuge, a habitat for butterflies and bees, and they love that. So, not only are you allowing to create a space for them, bees and butterflies, but you also have the solar panels creating clean energy, and then on top of that, you're reducing the heat island effect on the rooftops. All right, I'm going to go back to sport as being a neighbor, a good neighbor, in fact. There's a lot of great examples out there. In fact, in Geelong, I don't know how many Geelong Cats fans are in the house, but Simmons Stadium has a lot of great storm water harvesting practices on site. And then this is where I really want to show you that this is a pinnacle example of how sport can be a great neighbor. This is Melbourne Olympic Park, and you can see the MCG, you can see where the tennis courts are and so on. And I think you might be familiar with a lot of the development that's happening right now. All of the facilities that are being developed over for tennis is actually trying to get to a stage where they can achieve LEED certification, which is Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. And they have to adhere to building standards that are across 5 different areas. That is sustainable sites, water efficiency, energy and atmosphere, materials recovery, and then indoor environmental air quality. So Margaret Court, the new one, is actually gold certified. We should be really proud of that. And then I just want to draw your attention to the MCG. Now, the MCG, as you can see, is situated within Yarra Park, and Yarra Park is their neighbor. This is a penultimate example of them being a good neighbor. They have designed, built, and are operating a water treatment facility on site, and they actually treat water to the extent that it's at Class A level. That's pretty impressive, and they use 600 they produce 600 kiloliters of water that actually waters that surrounding park. So that's a lot of sugar and milk that they're sharing with Yarra Park. And if you look at the front, you can see that there's two little kind of blue boxes. They're glass. If you go to Melbourne Park, have a look around the facility, and that's actually the entrance to the water facility. So in summary, you can be part. Sports a really good neighbor to the planet. I think they've done quite well, and we're moving in that direction. We talked about that everyone here can be part of that journey of trying to get the planet from where it is now by doing less bad to get to survival mode, and then we can do more good by being better neighbors to each other, in particular the planet. And just a last reminder, be a good neighbor. Don't be a vampire because they suck. Thank you.